My name is Athena. I am 32 years old, and I run operations for a commercial restaurant group that seats over 3,000 guests a week across 4 locations. I know how a check moves from the kitchen ticket wheel to the final payment ledger the way most people know how to tie their own shoes. When you spend 15 years studying the mechanics of hospitality, you realize very quickly that a dinner table is rarely just a place to eat. It is an arena. It is where power dynamics are tested, where unspoken rules are enforced, and where people show you exactly who they are when they think someone else is footing the bill. So, when my parents called me out of the blue after 3 solid years of complete, icy silence and invited me to dinner to make amends, I should have asked one critical question before I ever agreed to leave my apartment. I should have asked, who is actually going to be sitting at that table? I didn't ask. I wanted to believe that time had softened the sharp edges of our history. I drove 40 minutes across town to the Grand Marquis, walked through the heavy glass doors into the dimly lit dining room, and found 16 members of my extended family already crammed around a massive private table. Fanned across crushed ice in front of them were dozens of jumbo lobster tails, prime cuts of Wagyu beef, and 3 bottles of a $400 vintage Bordeaux that they had started pouring long before my car even entered the parking lot. My father looked up from the head of the table, wiped a streak of garlic butter from his chin, smiled, and uttered the exact phrase I had spent my entire adult life trying to escape. "You're paying, right? You owe us that much." He truly believed he had trapped me. He thought that by surrounding me with relatives, in a public space, under the weight of an exorbitant bill, I would simply fold, pull out my card, and play the role of the endless family bank account once again. What he didn't count on were the 2 precise sentences I was about to whisper to our waiter. Nor did he anticipate what his own credit card was about to reveal to the entire family just 15 minutes later. Before we dive deeper into how this dinner completely imploded, take a quick second to hit that subscribe button to see how this wild story unfolds. Drop a comment right now, letting me know which country or city you are watching from today. I personally read the comments and would love to say hello to see just how far our community reaches. To understand how I ended up sitting at the end of a long white linen table staring down a $4,000 bill, you have to understand who I was before that invitation arrived. Because that was the version of me my family was counting on, the soft, guilty, hyper-responsible version I had spent 3 years trying to unlearn. I built my career from the absolute bottom. I started bussing tables at a greasy steakhouse when I was 17 years old, going to high school the next morning still smelling like deep fryer oil and lemon sanitizer. Hostess at 19, server at 21, floor manager by 24, and regional operations director by 30. I don't own the restaurants I manage, but I run them with surgical precision. I own a modest 2-bedroom condo that is entirely paid off. I keep an emergency fund I never touch. And I live well below my means. My one consistent habit whenever I dine out is ordering plain sparkling water with a slice of lime. My operational staff thinks it's just a funny personal quirk. It isn't. When you grow up in a household where you are constantly forced to pay for everyone else's expensive choices, you subconsciously learn to keep your own personal tab as small as humanly possible, so you can walk away the second things turn sour. That Tuesday morning, I was sitting in my glass-walled office reviewing inventory spreadsheets when my phone vibrated against the desk. I glanced down and felt a cold, familiar knot tighten right behind my ribs. After 3 years of total silence, a notification popped up on my screen. I had been added back into the primary family group chat, the same chat named with a red heart emoji that my mother created years ago, back when we still shared holiday photos. The chat history was completely cleared. Mom's message was smooth, carefully worded, and practically dripping with artificial warmth. She wrote that she and Dad had been doing a lot of deep soul-searching, and they wanted to invite me to an intimate dinner at the Grand Marquis so we could finally start healing as a family. "Just the 4 of us," she wrote. "You, me, Dad, and your sister Chloe. A small dinner to make a fresh start." Then, 30 seconds later, a follow-up text appeared that should have triggered every alarm bell in my head. "Family takes care of family, sweetheart. It's time we remembered that." Family takes care of family had been my mother's favorite rallying cry for as long as I could remember, But in our house, it had always carried a very specific one-sided translation. Athena takes care of family. She used to say it when I was 19 and handing over my weekly server tips so she could cover the electric bill. She said it when I was 23, and Dad needed a reliable cosigner to get a loan for a new work truck. She said it when my younger sister Chloe's first apartment lease fell through, and I quietly paid her security deposit and first month's rent out of my own modest savings. I didn't do it because I was rich, and I certainly didn't do it because I wanted praise. I did it because I had been conditioned from a young age to believe that my worth in the family was directly tied to my utility. Keep the peace, write the check, ask no questions. 3 years ago, Chloe decided she wanted to open an artisanal tea shop. She had no business plan, no market research, no commercial experience, and no understanding of profit margins. She simply saw a sleek aesthetic on social media and decided she deserved to be a business owner. She went to a bank for a $60,000 small business loan, and when they requested a qualified cosigner, my parents called me. I asked to look over her financial projections first. Chloe had none. I asked about her lease agreement, her vendor accounts, and her monthly burn rate. Chloe looked at me like I had slapped her across the face. My mother's voice instantly turned cold and hard. "She's your sister, Athena. You don't need a spreadsheet to love your sister." I said no. I had spent years in the restaurant industry, watching ill-prepared ventures collapse under the weight of debt, and I refused to anchor my own financial future to a fantasy. My father stood up from the living room table, pointed toward the front door, and said the words that severed our relationship for 3 long years. "If you won't step up for this family when it matters, then you aren't a part of it." The very next morning, I was removed from the group chat. Nobody called, nobody texted. For 36 months, I was vilified as the cold-hearted daughter who valued her bank account more than her own flesh and blood. So when Mom's message popped up after all those years of complete exile, that old, deeply ingrained reflex fired off in my chest. Go fix it. Pay whatever price they want. Make it quiet again. But I caught myself. I took a deep breath, typed back a simple agreement to attend, and set a strict rule for myself. 1. Dinner. Be polite. Spend 0 money. Leave early. Have you ever felt forced into taking financial or emotional responsibility for people who wouldn't do the same for you? Drop a comment below. I'd love to read your stories. The night of the dinner arrived. The drive to the Grand Marquis took 40 minutes. I wore a simple black trouser suit, professional, clean, completely understated. I didn't want to perform, and I certainly didn't want to look like someone who was flaunting financial success. As I pulled into the manicured parking lot of the restaurant, my stomach began to twist into tight, uncomfortable knots. Then I saw the cars parked under the warm amber streetlights. Dad's pickup truck was parked in the front row. Mom's sedan was right beside it, but next to them stood my Aunt Sarah's silver Volvo, Uncle Mark's oversized SUV, Chloe's subcompact car with the fading bumper stickers. 4 other vehicles belonging to cousins, spouses, and extended relatives I hadn't spoken to in half a decade. Just the 4 of us, Mom's text message had explicitly stated. I counted 10 separate family vehicles sitting in that lot. My pulse spiked. My first instinct was to shift my car into reverse, back out of the lot, and drive straight home to my quiet condo. That would have been the logical thing to do, but I was 32 years old. I had spent 3 years in therapy, learning how to stand my ground rather than running away out of fear of conflict. I turned off the ignition, stepped out into the cool evening air, smoothed my jacket, and walked through the front doors. The Grand Marquis was an opulent establishment, the kind of high-end dining room where water gets poured from copper pitchers and appetizers start at $30. A polished hostess in a black dress smiled as I approached. "Name? Mayfair?" I said quietly. Her smile shifted slightly into an expression I recognized instantly from my own years in hospitality, a subtle look of fatigue mixed with sympathy. "Ah, yes, the Mayfair party. They are already seated in the private alcove at the back." She picked up a single menu and led me through the bustling dining room. Even before we reached the alcove, I could hear them. Aunt Sarah's piercing laugh echoed off the brick walls, accompanied by the energetic clinking of glassware and loud chatter. When we turned the corner, The full reality of the setup hit me like a physical blow. It was a long table with 16 high-backed chairs, every single one occupied except for the lonely, empty seat positioned at the far end directly opposite my father. White linen covered the table, which was already buried under towering seafood towers, raw oysters, charred Wagyu beef skewers, and multiple open bottles of a $400 vintage red wine. They hadn't waited for me. They had been sitting there for at least an hour, ordering at an astounding rate. As the hostess pulled out my chair, she leaned in close to my ear and whispered in a low, professional tone, "Just so you know, ma'am, your father placed a credit card on file to secure the private alcove reservation tonight." I logged that critical piece of operational information away in my mind immediately. His card was holding the table. He was legally bound to the reservation. And yet, as I looked around at 16 smiling faces clapping mockingly at my arrival, I knew with absolute certainty who they expected to take care of the bill. "Athena, look at you!" my mother cried out, standing up with arms outstretched as if we hadn't spent the last 3 years in total silence. The entire table broke into applause, a loud, theatrical display that made my skin crawl. Aunt Sarah dabbed her eyes with a napkin, Uncle Mark whistled, and my sister Chloe raised her glass of vintage Bordeaux with a sly, knowing smirk. 16 people, a sea of expensive seafood, prime cuts of meat, and rare wine. Just the 4 of us, my mother's message had promised. I sat down, keeping my posture straight and my expression completely neutral. "I thought this was supposed to be a quiet family catch-up," I said evenly. Mom waved her hand dismissively, her gold bracelets clinking together. "Oh, you know how it is, sweetheart." Once Sarah heard we were finally getting together, and then Mark and the kids. "Well, everyone just wanted to welcome you back into the fold. Family takes care of family, after all." There were those 5 words again, wrapped in fake warmth and targeted straight at my conscience. I looked over at my father. He was sitting at the head of the table, carving into a Wagyu slider with a smug sense of satisfaction. He signaled our young server, a nervous young man whose name tag read Marcus, and waved his hand grandly over the table. "Bring us another round of those lobster tails, Marcus, and 2 more plates of the Wagyu. Oh, and another bottle of the 2016 Bordeaux, the good one." Marcus scribbled furiously on his pad, nodding. Dad pulled his polished leather wallet from his jacket, pulled out a credit card, and held it between 2 fingers like a magician performing a cheap trick. "Put it all on this for now." Dad boasted loudly enough for neighboring tables to hear. "We're celebrating tonight." I watched him tuck the card back away. It was a completely calculated performance. Raymond Mayfair was a man who habitually complained about $5 parking fees and returned worn shoes to the store for refunds. He did not casually order $400 bottles of wine. He was acting like a wealthy patriarch to show me how little they needed my approval, while simultaneously setting up an outrageous bill that he had zero intention of settling himself. As the meal dragged on, the subtle jabs began. Aunt Sarah leaned across the table and remarked, "Must be nice running those high-end dining rooms, while the rest of us are struggling with grocery prices." Uncle Mark casually brought up how hard things had been financially, while Chloe constantly dropped hints about how lucky I was to live in a paid-off condo. Every comment was a carefully placed brick, building a narrative that I was wealthy, selfish, and somehow owed them a debt for my success. Are you enjoying the story so far? If this family setup makes your blood boil, make sure to give the video a like. It helps more people find our channel. Around the 1-hour mark, I excused myself to the restroom. I needed 5 minutes of peace away from the passive-aggressive comments and the suffocating atmosphere of the alcove. The Grand Marquis restroom was luxurious, featuring marble countertops, soft lighting, and full-length mirrors. As I washed my hands with cold water to steady my rising pulse, I noticed a phone resting on the edge of the sink counter. It had a bright pink case covered in floral stickers. Chloe's phone. She had left it behind, just as she always did. The screen was lit up with a persistent flood of group chat notifications. The chat was titled, "Operation Dinner Party." I didn't want to pry, but the preview banner text sitting right at the top made my breath catch in my throat. A message from my mother read, "Don't tell Athena the whole family is coming. Once she's sitting there with everyone watching, she won't dare cause a scene or say no. She's always been too weak to stand up to us in public. My stomach dropped, but my mind went razor sharp. I picked up the phone and scrolled up through weeks of messages. Dad, make sure she sits right across from me. I'll drop the hammer when the check comes. Chloe, order the most expensive stuff on the menu before she gets there. Once it's on the table, she can't send it back. LOL. Mom sent a week ago. We aren't asking for money. We're letting her buy her way back into this family. She should be grateful we're even giving her the opportunity. Grateful. They believed I should feel honored to be manipulated, ambushed, and financially exploited by the very people who had discarded me 3 years ago. I placed Chloe's phone back on the marble counter in the exact spot I found it. I dried my hands, looked at my reflection in the mirror, and felt a profound sense of clarity wash over me. The guilt, the hesitation, the lingering desire to regain their love, it all evaporated in an instant. I wasn't dealing with a family that missed me. I was dealing with a coordinated group of predators who viewed my hard work as their personal slush fund. I walked back out into the dining room with a polite, professional smile pinned to my face. The game was about to change. When I returned to the table, the energy in the room was electric with anticipation. Desserts were being brought out, massive slices of chocolate lava cake, artisan cheese boards, and individual ramekins of espresso creme brulee. Chloe was casually sipping the last of her third glass of Bordeaux, grinning like she had already won the grand prize. "You know, Athena," Chloe said loudly, tapping her manicured nails on the tablecloth, "it's so nice that you're finally stepping up tonight. I mean, we all ordered the premium items because we knew you were treating us to celebrate coming back." The table quieted down instantly. Aunt Sarah smiled expectantly, Uncle Mark leaned back in his chair, and my mother watched me with a sharp, calculating gaze. My father set his spoon down against his dessert plate with a soft click. He cleared his throat, folded his hands neatly over his stomach, and fixed me with the look of a man delivering a generous verdict. "Well, Athena," Dad said, his voice echoing across the private alcove, "you're paying the bill, right? You owe us that much after keeping your distance for 3 years. You owe us that much." 16 pairs of eyes locked onto me, waiting for the predictable surrender. They expected the old Athena, the one who would swallow her pride, pull out her black corporate card, pay the $4,000 total, and quietly cry on the drive home just to avoid making a scene in public. I picked up my cloth napkin, gently wiped my lips, and set it neatly beside my glass of sparkling water. I smiled warmly at my father. "Let me go step away and take care of everything," I said smoothly. Mom exhaled a sigh of relief. Dad smirked and nodded, completely convinced that his trap had sprung perfectly. "Good girl," he muttered. I stood up from the table and walked out of the alcove, but I didn't head toward the front reception desk or the cashier terminal. Instead, I walked straight to the service station near the kitchen pass, where Marcus, our server, was organizing order tickets alongside David, the shift floor manager. I approached David, keeping my posture relaxed and my voice low, clear, and steady. "Excuse me, David," I said quietly. David turned, offering a practiced hospitality smile. "Yes, ma'am? Is everything all right with the Mayfair table?" I looked him dead in the eye and delivered 2 precise sentences. "I am not the host of this party, and I will not be paying for table 16 tonight. Please present the full itemized check directly to the gentleman seated at the head of the table, whose credit card is currently holding the reservation on file." David's eyes flicked over to Marcus, then back to me. As an experienced restaurant manager, he understood the exact operational dynamic unfolding. "Understood," David replied without missing a beat. "And secondary task," I added, pulling out my personal wallet. "Please split off my single glass of sparkling water onto its own receipt. I'd like to pay for it right now, along with a 30% tip for Marcus for handling such a chaotic table." I swiped my card, signed the receipt for my $5 water, handed Marcus his cash tip, and walked serenely back to my seat. What do you think about setting boundaries with toxic family members? Share your thoughts in the comments below. 10 minutes later, Marcus walked into the alcove holding a thick, dark leather check presenter. The conversation at the table was buzzing. My cousins were laughing, Aunt Sarah was planning an after-dinner drink, and Dad was leaning back like a king presiding over his court. Marcus bypassed me entirely. He walked straight to the head of the table and placed the leather folio directly in front of my father. The atmosphere at the table instantly dropped by 20 degrees. Dad stared at the leather folio sitting on the white tablecloth. He didn't pick it up. He looked up at Marcus, then shot a quick, bewildered glance down at my end of the table. "Excuse me, son," Dad said, trying to maintain his booming composure. "I think you brought this to the wrong person. The check goes down there." He pointed a finger at me. Marcus kept his hands folded behind his back, his expression professionally neutral. "Sir, the young lady has already settled her individual order. Per management policy, the remaining master bill for parties over 8 is presented to the guest whose card secured the private reservation." Mom's smile shattered. Chloe's mouth fell open. Dad's face flushed a deep, mottled red. He picked up the presenter and flicked it open. His eyes scanned the grand total at the bottom. $4,128.50. He couldn't show weakness in front of 16 family members he had invited under the pretense of hosting a grand victory feast. Desperate to save face, Dad pulled out his shiny gold credit card with a shaky hand and slapped it into the book. Fine. Just process it. We're celebrating." Marcus took the book and walked away. 4 agonizing minutes passed. The table was dead silent. Nobody ate. Nobody drank. Marcus returned, leaning down discreetly next to Dad's ear. But in the quiet alcove, his low voice carried across every seat. "I'm sorry, Mr. Mayfair. This card has been declined by your issuing bank." Aunt Sarah gasped. Uncle Mark looked away, suddenly fascinated by the crown molding. "What?" Dad barked, his voice cracking. "That's impossible. Run it again." Marcus left and returned 2 minutes later, his expression grim. "It is still declining, sir. Do you have an alternate form of payment for the $4,000? Dad frantically pulled out a second card. Declined. A third card. Declined. The illusion was shattered. The proud, wealthy patriarch was sitting at a table covered in expensive seafood remnants, completely bankrupt, exposed before the entire family he had tried to impress. Dad's hands trembled violently as he stared down at his wallet, empty of functional credit. The mask of smug superiority had completely fallen away, revealing a desperate, defeated man. He looked up at me from across the table, his eyes filled with a mixture of raw panic and intense fury. "Athena," Dad rasped, his voice barely a whisper before rising into a harsh growl. "What did you do? What did you do to my cards?" "I didn't do anything, Dad," I replied, keeping my voice perfectly level and quiet. "Your cards were declined because you don't have the funds. That is strictly between you and your bank. You were supposed to pay." Chloe suddenly shrieked, slamming her palms onto the table and knocking over a water glass. "You ruined everything. You knew we ordered all of this for you." "No, Chloe," I said, standing up smoothly and pulling my small purse over my shoulder. "You ordered all of this because you thought you could trap me into picking up the check. I read the messages on your phone in the restroom, Chloe. I saw Operation Dinner Party. I saw how you all planned to use public pressure to force my hand." The entire alcove went dead silent. Chloe's face drained of color, turning as white as the linen tablecloth. My mother covered her mouth with both hands, tears finally streaming down her face. Not tears of sorrow, but tears of humiliation. Aunt Sarah looked disgusted, turning to my father. "Raymond, did you set us up too? You told us Athena was hosting us to apologize." "Athena, please." Dad choked out, his arrogance entirely shattered as he realized the restaurant manager was standing by with security protocols on standby. "We're drowning. The business failed 18 months ago. We owe hundreds of thousands. You can't leave us like this." "If you need real help, Dad," I said, looking him dead in the eye, "I will sit down with you and a legitimate debt counselor, but I will never pay for a lie. I don't owe you my hard-earned life, and I never did." I turned away from the table, taking a quiet, deep breath as I walked past the host stand and out into the cool night air. When I got into my car, I didn't cry. I picked up my phone, opened the family group chat, scrolled to the bottom, and clicked Leave Group. A profound wave of peace washed over me. In the weeks that followed, I learned through my cousin Megan, the only relative who sent a private message apologizing for the setup, that the family had to split the massive bill across 8 different debit cards and cash pools to clear their debt with restaurant. My parents were forced to downsize their home, and Chloe finally had to take an entry-level job to pay off her own debts. I realized that night that setting a boundary isn't about being cruel. It's about refusing to let other people destroy your life to keep themselves comfortable. Thank you so much for listening to my story on Revenge Petal. If Athena's journey resonated with you, please hit that subscribe button. Give this video a thumbs up and share it with someone who needs the strength to set their own boundaries today. I'll see you in the next story.